Imagine standing on a normal street in Boston on a cold January afternoon. People are going about their day. Horses and wagons move through the streets. Workers are heading home. Children are playing nearby. Then suddenly, a massive steel tank bursts apart, and an enormous wave of molasses comes crashing through the streets. Not water, not mud. Molasses. It moves through the neighborhood with incredible force, destroying buildings, damaging vehicles, and trapping people in its path. This sounds like something from a bizarre movie, but it really happened. On January 15, 1919, Boston experienced one of the strangest and deadliest industrial disasters in American history. This is the story of the Great Molasses Flood. Welcome to Echoes, history they never taught us. To understand what happened, we have to go back to Boston's North End in the early 20th century. At the time, molasses was an important industrial product. It was used as a sweetener in food production and to produce industrial alcohol. Near Boston's waterfront stood a gigantic storage tank belonging to the United States Industrial Alcohol Company. The tank was enormous. It was approximately 50 feet tall and 90 feet wide, capable of holding more than 2 million gallons of molasses. Think about that. Millions of gallons of thick, heavy liquid sitting inside one enormous metal container in the middle of a busy neighborhood. And there were warning signs that something wasn't right. Residents reportedly heard strange noises coming from the tank. Some even collected leaking molasses from around the structure. But the tank remained in use. Then came January 15, 1919. It was shortly after noon. The weather was unusually mild for January. Workers were nearby. People were walking through the streets. Then, without warning, the tank failed. The enormous container burst apart. More than 2 million gallons of molasses were suddenly released. The liquid rushed outward in a huge wave. Accounts from the time describe a wall of molasses moving through the streets at tremendous speed. Buildings were damaged. Railroad structures were affected. Vehicles were pushed aside. People nearby had almost no time to react. The thick liquid spread through the neighborhood, turning streets into a dangerous, sticky mass. For people caught in the flood, escaping was extremely difficult. The disaster was over in only a matter of minutes. But its consequences would last for years. When the flood finally stopped moving, Boston's North End looked completely different. Buildings had been damaged. Wood and metal debris were scattered throughout the area. Railroad infrastructure had been affected. And the streets were covered with a thick layer of molasses. Rescue workers rushed into the area. But helping people was extremely difficult. The molasses was heavy and sticky, and debris was mixed throughout it. People searched for survivors while emergency crews tried to clear the streets. The human cost was devastating. 21 people died, and around 150 others were injured. Among those affected were workers, residents, and people who simply happened to be in the area that afternoon. One of the victims was a young boy. Another was a firefighter. The disaster had struck an ordinary neighborhood during an ordinary afternoon, and now an entire community was dealing with an extraordinary catastrophe. But an important question remained. How could a tank holding molasses suddenly collapse like that? At first, the company responsible for the tank attempted to argue that the disaster had been caused by sabotage, but investigators began looking more closely at the tank itself. They discovered serious problems. The tank had reportedly been constructed using metal that was too thin for the enormous pressure it had to withstand. There were also concerns about the quality of its construction. Leaks had occurred before the disaster, and instead of treating those leaks as a serious warning, they had reportedly been covered or concealed. The investigation became part of a massive legal battle. Families and victims sought compensation. The case eventually became one of the largest class action lawsuits of its time. After years of legal proceedings, a court-appointed auditor concluded that the tank had failed because of structural problems and inadequate design and construction, not because of sabotage. The disaster demonstrated something that would become increasingly important in the modern industrial world. Safety cannot be treated as an afterthought. Then came another enormous challenge: cleaning up the molasses. It was everywhere. Streets, buildings, vehicles, sidewalks, and public infrastructure had been coated with the sticky substance. Workers spent weeks cleaning the area. But the cleanup was not simple. Molasses could be tracked far beyond the original disaster zone. People walking through the streets carried it on their shoes. Vehicles spread it even farther. Eventually, water was used extensively to wash the streets and structures. The cleanup effort became a massive operation involving firefighters, police officers, soldiers, workers, and volunteers. For weeks, the smell of molasses remained in parts of Boston. The disaster wasn't simply something that happened and disappeared. It became part of the daily life of the neighborhood. The Great Molasses Flood also had consequences far beyond Boston. The victims and their families wanted answers. Who was responsible? Was the tank defective? Had the company ignored warning signs? Was the disaster preventable? The resulting legal case lasted for years. More than 100 people brought claims against the company. Eventually, the court found the company responsible for the disaster. The case became historically important because it helped demonstrate how companies could be held accountable for industrial disasters. It also showed the importance of proper engineering, inspection, testing, and public safety. In the years that followed, building and industrial standards became increasingly important across the United States. The Great Molasses Flood became an unusual but powerful reminder that industrial structures could pose enormous risks when safety was ignored. Today, the Great Molasses Flood is sometimes remembered almost like an unbelievable story. A city street flooded with molasses. It sounds strange, almost impossible. But behind the bizarre headline was a real tragedy that changed a community and influenced industrial safety. 21 people lost their lives, around 150 were injured, and countless others were affected by the disaster. The story reminds us that history isn't only about kings, wars, presidents, and famous battles. Sometimes history hides in the strangest places. Sometimes it's found in a forgotten street, inside an enormous industrial tank, or beneath a layer of molasses that once covered an entire neighborhood. And that's exactly why these stories matter. Because history is full of events we were never taught. This is Echoes, history they never taught us. If you enjoyed this forgotten chapter of history, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments, would you have believed this story if you hadn't known it really happened? Until next time. Keep looking into the past, because some of history's most incredible stories are the ones we've almost forgotten.